Today I'm going to unbox and try the Kywoo3D Tycoon Max with a build volume of 300 by 300 by 230 millimeter. Kywoo is a fairly new manufacturer, but they have some decent machines and they are constantly making improvements, which is great. They are happy to accept feedback, and I gave them my feedback after purchasing this and setting it up, so future models will be improved. So this has linear rails, auto leveling. It already has a BL Touch installed in the extruder assembly. It has a filament runout sensor. It is a direct drive unit. It has dual Z motors, color touch screen. There's a fancy little frame cover so that you don't see all the electronics and it doesn't look quite as ugly. They do have a version that's a slim that doesn't have that on it. It does have Wi-Fi, and I do like that they already have profiles set for Cura and Simplify 3D that you can download. And the documentation is pretty good. They did come out with a new firmware a couple days before I actually received my machine, which I also installed. There are some worries if you have an older machine that we found out with this, but if you're getting a new machine, it will already have the new firmware installed and you won't have to worry about it. So here's the bed. It just slides in underneath the extruder assembly. There's some plugs and the belt between the motors. You can just pull on that to move the extruder up and down so that you have enough space to put the bed in, and then just slide in the bed, and there are 4 screws to install. So this is actually what it would look like once you have it installed and screwed in from underneath. So this is what it looks like underneath with the extruder assembly with the BL Touch, the fan that actually goes underneath other than off to the side like most machines, which makes it nice and compact. And up in the top is the circuit board, and that has the Wi-Fi module in it. And then in the very bottom are your Z motors. There are 2 of them with a belt attached in between. So I tip it on its side and then I go to put the bed in. The smaller Tycoon looks like it would actually just slide in and line up. The Max has a little bit of space in the frame because it's bigger, so you have to kind of hold it suspended while trying to get the screws in. It makes it a little bit more difficult, but once you get that first screw in, the rest are much easier. The overall setup is very easy. Just follow the instructions. It's a few screws, a few cables, set your auto level Z offset, and you are ready to print. So if you're looking for something that's easy to set up, easy to get going, this is a good machine for that. If you're looking for something that's a little bit more, you should check out their IDEX model, which is dual extruder and has a mirror copying replication function. It wasn't available when I purchased this machine, but it also looks very promising. I'll include links to each of their printers in the description so you can check them out. While I finish putting this together, let me just tell you something important. These are the coolest people in the world. Thank you so much for your support. It is super appreciated. If you would also like to support this channel, just go to ko-fi.com/geekhappens and just do a one-time donation or sign up for a membership if you are so inclined, and get access to my 3D models that you could then print with one of your Kywoo printers. Before turning on your printer, make sure that the power supply is set to the correct voltage. Here is the satisfying peel, if I was good at peeling it off satisfyingly. But anyway, there it is. You may notice that the build volume is not as tall as, say, an Ender 3 Max, but I rarely print anything that is that tall anyway, and the way that the extruder goes up, it goes up in between those 2 top bars. So keep that in mind when you put it wherever you're going to put it, because for me, I put it on the bottom shelf with the spool holder off to the side rather than on the top. But just for how it's going to be set and how it should be done, I put the spool holder on the top. power it on. You can see the BL touch turns on, the screen turns on, another satisfying peel perhaps. Yeah, I'm not great at that. And then just following the manual, I will run an auto home and an auto level. I put my hand on the power switch ready to shut it off in case something goes wrong, but nothing does, which is great. If you have other machines, you may be surprised to see that it homes in the opposite direction, but that's fine. Just keep in mind that when you do a print, it will be on the build plate backwards of the way that you slice it. It is doing a 4x4 bed level. The card also had some files on it already to flash with the new firmware when I got it, so I installed that. Simply by turning off the machine, inserting the card, and turning it back on, it will automatically go and update to this version, which is still the first version, just a newer version of that, but it is not the version 2, which came out like 2 days before this printer arrived, that I will also install. So when you get a new printer, it will actually come with the newer board and the newer firmware already, so your screen won't look like this. Loading the filament from the top, put the spool on the spool holder on the top, and then it just comes down into the filament sensor, which will automatically stop the machine if there is a break, if the break happens before the sensor, or if you run out of filament. It goes down then into the extruder. With the shield that they have on there, it's a little difficult to get in there and hit the actual lever, and sometimes if you don't get it angled just right, it takes a little bit to get it to go down in, but overall with two hands rather than filming, it's not that hard to thread. I put the new version 2 firmware on the SD card and put the SD card in and turn the machine on to then update to the newest firmware that they have. I didn't know this at the time, and they probably didn't either, but they now have a warning on the website for updating to version 2. If you have an older board, it isn't 100% compatible. But once I get the new firmware up and running, you just touch the screen to calibrate it, and then you'll have the new interface, which is really nice. Rather than just buttons that take you to different things, it actually shows you the graph in real time of your nozzle, your fan, your bed temperature, your Z offset, everything. You just tap on the actual item and it will take you there. So you have your settings, and then you have for your storage the things that are on the card. If you have your prints, you could select them there and then start to print them. You have the Z offset there that you can set with your plus or minus, or just use the slider, but I wouldn't do that for the Z offset. You get the same slider for your nozzle and bed temperatures. You can use the same thing for the fan speed. Later I found out you can click on the XYZ there underneath the nozzles, and you can use those. That gives you the options to move your axes. So I'm just going to preheat the nozzle by setting it to about 200, and then as soon as you hit the check mark to OK that temperature, it will start to heat up and shows you on the display, which is very nice. So I go ahead and run the test print on the card so that I can then find my Z offset, basically start the print. It will start printing, and then you can go to the bottom right corner there and start adjusting your Z offset by moving the nozzle up and down slowly until you get a really good adhesion on the first layer. And I just hold down the minus rather than using the slider because I don't want it to go super fast and crash into the bed and then damage the nozzle or the build plate. Once I get it where I want it for that first layer, I will set it by hitting the check mark, and then I just go ahead and cancel the print because I don't need it to finish. And now I can start a print of the Kywoo bot. And this is the current speed, but I'm going to speed that up because we don't have that many hours. So here it goes in super speed. And faster still. And here we have our Kywoo bot test print, and the quality of this machine is really good. I thought it would be a little bit better, to be honest, with the direct drive. There's a little bit of overhangs. I think the main issue is the cooling. It looks like the fan is aimed more at the heat block and not as much at the nozzle, but they're working on that and they have some different things to try that I'll show later. So I tried to do the wireless update for the Wi-Fi module, and they have all the downloads available on their site. I have all the new files ready to go, and then just follow the instructions on enabling the Wi-Fi function. You connect to the 3D printer, which normally for you would be the Kywoo3D Wi-Fi, but again, this is an older version, so I assume that's why it's this random name. But once I get connected, I find out which IP address is trying to give me so that I know where to go in a web browser to upload the updated file. You don't install the Wi-Fi module through the SD card. Instead, you connect to the Wi-Fi of the 3D printer. It has this upload file option. You select the firmware for the updated module, and then you upload it. However, again, this is where the issues are. I don't think it was compatible with this board, and so once I updated it, it shows the Kywoo3D now. It shows them both actually, but I can't connect to the old one, so I try to connect to the new one following the instructions using the ID, and no matter what I try, the wireless no longer works. I cannot connect to it. I've tried restarting the machine, various things. I find out now that it was probably because it is incompatible. But that's okay, I can try playing with it again later. But when you do get it connected, you can then upload an index file that has all the web files that they have for the interface, which is actually really cool and very handy. It would essentially eliminate the need for a Raspberry Pi, although I would probably just put a Raspberry Pi with Octoprint on it anyway, but that's just me. This is really cool because you can do it without that. So once you get your index file uploaded, you can then go to the interface, choose the language, and then you can go and set it for Marlin, and then it actually has this built-in prompter face, so you can control the actual printer moving things. You can heat up your nozzles in your bed and do everything you normally would do using Octoprint. To an extent, there is a limit of what you can upload. It does have to be a GCO file, and the file name limit is 5 characters. Now with the original firmware, I could connect the 3D printer to my Wi-Fi on my router, but I'm not sure if that's the way it's meant to function with this. You may have to connect directly to the printer rather than going through the network, but I can't verify that where it is not working on mine. However, I would very highly doubt it not being included in the new version if it was in the old version. So looking at the extruder, it's just the 4 screws to get that shield off, and then a couple of grub screws to get the knob off. The filament shavings can just be blown off or brushed out, that's not a big deal. And then there's the fan, and it's aimed mostly at the heat block. It does have a little bit of an angle to get almost to the nozzle. I pulled it off. It looks like it was maybe even warped or melted. I don't know, that could be part of the design, but looking at the files on Thingiverse for it, I think it does not have that bevel in it. In any case, I went and found they also have a different version that lets you blow air from the sides that I printed. The only other thing I'm noticing with this also is that it looks like it's blowing the air straight out the sides horizontally, which where it sits so high goes directly into the heat block. So I took that model that they had and I cut an angle. I kept it so that the airflow was at that 45 downward degree angle so that it would be a little bit closer to blowing on the print at the tip of the nozzle rather than directly into the heat block. I'm sure they'll have upgraded versions later, and future models will probably have something improved already included with it. I uploaded my modification to Thingiverse, so if you also have an older version, you're welcome to try this to see if it gives a little bit better airflow. If you print one, just make sure that you print it in ABS or PETG that's a higher temperature resistance for how close that is to the hot end so that it doesn't warp. Overall, it's a good machine. It's really simple to set up if you're a first-time printer. I personally think that the print quality of the Creality Ender 3 is a little bit better, but Kywoo is constantly making changes, improvements, and working on their design, so that may not even be true anymore. I hope this video has been helpful to you, whether you're looking for a new printer or just curious about the Kywoo printers. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.